Welcome to Inside Politics on the first day of the new year. I'm Nia Malika Henderson, sitting in for John King. Who could have predicted we would begin 2017 with a throwback to the Cold War, or with President-elect Donald Trump praising what he calls a great move by a very smart Vladimir Putin? It all started when President Obama hit Russia with sanctions for what the U.S. government describes as cyber attacks and meddling in the presidential election. On Thursday, the U.S. ordered 35 Russian diplomats to leave the country, demanded the Russians close 2 compounds, and sanctioned Russian spy agencies, individuals, and companies the U.S. government says were involved in the hacking. In a statement, President Obama also said that his administration will do more, and not all of those punishments might be made public. But that's only the beginning of the saga. Here to share their reporting and their insights, Matt Viser of the Boston Globe, the Daily Beast's Jackie Kucinich, NPR's Domenico Montanaro, and Karen Tumulty of the Washington Post. President Obama's move to punish Russia for meddling in the election brought only a 2-sentence written statement from President-elect Donald Trump. It's time for our country to move on to bigger and better things. Nevertheless, in the interest of our country and its great people, I will meet with leaders of the intelligence community next week in order to be updated on the facts of this situation. Trump made similar comments the day before sanctions were announced.
I think we ought to get on with our lives. I think that computers have complicated lives very greatly. The whole, age of computer has made it where nobody knows exactly what's going on. We have speed, we have a lot of other things, but I'm not sure you have the kind of security that you need.
Karen, remarkable to see an incoming Republican president seeming to reluctantly want to have an intelligence briefing, and seeming so far to say there's nothing to see here when it comes to Russia and Putin. How did we get here?
Well, he talks about moving on to bigger and better things. I don't know how you get much bigger than this. This is a new form of warfare. It is something, how did we get here? One question is why we haven't gotten here sooner. This is something that has been going on, at least for the last 9 years since Russia hacked Estonia. It is sort of where things were headed, and I think is going to be a major geopolitical issue going forward. Now, Donald Trump deciding after these sanctions that he is going to hear from the intelligence community is significant in two ways. It's possible that this will give him a way to sort of recalibrate on this, to say he has new information, to sort of quit poo-pooing the intelligence. The other thing is it could be a reset with his relationship with the intelligence community, which, again, he has also been sort of dismissing.
Right, and if there's any doubt about how he feels about Putin, at least, he tweeted on Friday, Trump did great move on delay by Vladimir Putin. I always knew he was very smart. Of course, Putin, the expectation was that Putin would respond in kind, maybe eject some U.S. diplomats. He didn't do that. Matt, what's your sense of how long Trump's stance towards Putin, some might call it a bromance, how long can he maintain that?
I mean, it's hard to tell, and I do think we're setting up for a major clash very early in President Trump's administration with John McCain, Lindsey Graham, people on the Hill ready to challenge Trump on some of his rhetoric on Russia. So I think that they're setting that up as a test of powers, really, within the Republican Party, too. The other thing, going back to his intelligence briefings, is that he has been briefed on these things,
right,
for a while, and he's had the opportunity to be briefed even more. And the way that his statement came across, it was as if he was doing us a favor by taking those briefings, when it's an obligation of the president to take those briefings. So I think that that's another thing that he'll be challenged more with in his respect of the intelligence community.
Well, and it's not even going to wait till he's inaugurated. And John McCain this week has a hearing that is going to begin looking into this. Rex Tillerson is going to have his confirmation hearings. And one of the first questions he's going to get is about this issue of hacking, and because he has such a close relationship with Vladimir Putin. So before Trump even takes the oath of office, there is going to be a debate within his own party. This isn't a partisan issue.
Right.
I mean, let's make that clear. But in terms of what he's saying and what you heard Republicans saying last week, saying that there were too few sanctions. It was too little, too late.
That's what Paul Ryan said.
Yeah, Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, most Republicans who are hawks were saying that. So they're talking past each other, and at some point, they're going to have to meet.
And Lindsey Graham, he has been very much out front on that, John McCain as well. Here is what Graham had to say.
99 of us believe the Russians did this. We're going to have the hearings, and we're going to put sanctions together that hit Putin as an individual and his inner circle for interfering in our election. And they're doing it all over the world, not just in the United States.
Domenico, it'll be hard for Trump to maintain this idea that this is a partisan witch hunt, if you will. That is what he has said. That is what some of his aides has said when it is Republicans who are leading the charge, and certainly Democrats are going to join them.
First of all, I love the phone behind Lindsey Graham. It was amazing. But, I do think, though, the idea that the Trump transition team goes to politics first. I heard Kellyanne Conway earlier this week say that it was politics. She's hoping it's not politics from President Obama, but has seen that before. There are ways to win elections, and there are elections, but there are also things that are facts. And as Matt was talking about with President-elect Trump, being able to take daily intelligence briefings and kind of setting those aside, saying they're repetitive, and now saying that he will meet with them to be updated on the facts. There are only two people right now who could push back against the intelligence community and say, open up the documents, show me everything you've got. If you're skeptical, between Donald Trump and Barack Obama, they're the only two people who could do that right now, and passing up that opportunity seems strange.
Yeah, and one of the things we also saw this week in terms of the contrast between this administration and the incoming administration on foreign policy was on Israel. And John Kerry, the outgoing Secretary of State, commented on the two-state solution. Here's what he had to say.
Despite our best efforts over the years, the two-state solution is now in serious jeopardy. Friends need to tell each other the hard truths, and friendships require mutual respect.
Matt, you have covered John Kerry. Why did he give this speech? Some people saw it as, in some ways, a eulogy for the two-state solution, and also about his legacy as well, John Kerry's legacy.
Yeah, I interviewed him 2 weeks ago, and it was very clear even then that this was very much on his mind. Exiting the administration, sort of seeing the end of his career, really, in office. And I think what led him here was feeling like the two-state solution was slipping away, and that they wanted to do something to put this back on the agenda. And he got ridiculed bipartisan, in terms of in Congress. But talking to people at the State Department this past week, they do feel comfortable that they have put this back on the radar, where Israel and its settlement policy is very much in the news. In Israel, there's a fierce debate going on right now, and internationally there is. So they're about to give up the reins of the State Department, but and Trump's administration, and Rex Tillerson, if he's confirmed, will go in probably a different direction with Israel. But they've set it up.
And he certainly signaled that Trump's nominee for ambassador to Israel is very pro-settlement.
David Friedman?
It is. I think that we're at a real kind of hinge point of U.S.-Israeli relations, and also of U.S. involvement in the Middle East peace process. And that speech is the hinge.
I mean, maybe you wouldn't have seen as strong a comment from Secretary Kerry if Hillary Clinton had won the election, let's say, because you have such a stark difference, as Karen's pointing out, in policy between what Barack Obama has done and what Donald Trump wants to do as far as a two-state solution or Mideast peace, that I think this is the Obama administration and people like John Kerry want to point out that this has been fairly consistent 40 years of policy to say that they're against settlement expansion. You don't want to, and that Jerusalem should be, is up for some negotiation for who runs which parts. I think the Obama administration in particular wants to put a stamp on that and go out legacy-wise to say, this is breaking with U.S. precedent over the last 40 years.
But you have to say, I mean, John Kerry better than I do, but this also was a personal speech. This was a very emotional speech for John Kerry. So as much as it was a legacy play, this also was Kerry's legacy and a speech he wouldn't have had to give had Hillary Clinton won. And if I'm remembering correctly, he wanted to give this speech earlier, and they said, no. They put it off because they thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. So you're kind of seeing this in real-time calibration from the Obama administration, because trying to rush and hurry to get everything done that they thought would be golden.
Yeah, and you will see, Matt, likely, I think, in Congress, some efforts to undo Obama's legacy, even on this UN resolution, right? Congress stepping forward to maybe slap this down and sort of say that they don't agree with this UN sanctioning or UN vote on Israel.
Yeah, I think that's very much in play. Funding for the UN and things like that are already sort of under threat. To Jackie's point, I do think there was a personal aspect about this for John Kerry. He spent the first year in office as Secretary of State trying to get these two parties together, Don Quixote-like to his critics,
right.
Just chasing the windmills. But he put a lot on the line to try and get them together. And in his the last couple of weeks, he's talked a lot about the ripeness of diplomacy. And he was very frustrated that the conditions were there, that he felt like to get these parties to talk, but he couldn't force them, to come to the table and to shake hands.
And Jackie, Trump has talked about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, resolving it, and it would be his ultimate deal if he was able to do that. What would that look like? Do we know?
No, we don't know. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that he said he was neutral,
right,
in the dispute, which obviously you cannot be, particularly when you're a world leader. I don't think we know that. I don't think we know that yet. A lot of it is going to depend on his ambassador, but what his ambassador is supporting right now sort of negates, if he decides to support settlements, if they move the embassy to Jerusalem, this is going to be a non-starter on the other side. So we'll have to see. There are a lot of open questions on what his policies will be, because he didn't start with any.
Right.
It was sort of went along, it kind of made him up as he went along.
Up next, Trump's economic mantra, I did that. The good news that the president-elect says belongs to him, and why he claims there's much more to come. But first, a politician say the darndest things flashback when then candidate Trump met toddler Trump.
What's your name?
Nay.
Now, he's supposed to look like Donald Trump, but he's actually much too good looking. You are really handsome. Where's your daddy? And your mommy, right? Do you want to go back? Do you want to go back to them, or do you want to stay with Donald Trump?
Trump.